time to break the tie. I'll live, I'll die, for what is wrong and what is right. I'll take the pain for all the ones without a name. To be invincible, we'll be invincible. To be invincible, we'll be
Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome back. I got my co-host Pavel the Cat Insider at hockey_2. You can find me, Evan Rev Rennerts at Revenev. Glad to be back with season 4, episode 39, I believe.
Yep. We are back here every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Remember that we go live, talk all things hockey, not just the NHL. We talk all KHL, AHL, whatever you want, CHL, WHL. We got your content. You can check out our website. Evan's going to give a little bit into that. We are partnered with Sports Empire for all your sporting needs. So you want to look at NBA, the finals just finished. What's going to happen in the offseason? The NFL, the MLB is going on right now. How are the Jays going to do? All your needs, you're going to find it there. You're going to find it with our guys Key and Freddie, who's back, and some of the other gentlemen who do amazing work in the podcast. But we are their hockey content. Check us out.
Hey, I did see, though, that I saw Jake get a few things on there recently. They've been adding some of their own hockey content. They've been trying to send us for a ride in a little bit of competition we got. All right, guys. Hey, so our opening song, you heard, we have exclusive rights to Invincible. Check out, they are an electronic infusion hard rock band called Penny Billionaires. They partnered up with us, giving us the rights to our exclusive song. And as our own good friend, Jamie Daskow, beat writer for Flyers Nitty Gritty down in Philly, said only a couple weeks ago, man, he would vote for us for the best intro podcast in all of Podcast Nation. So, hey, we may not be able to talk much else, but definitely we can actually talk around there. As well, guys, we just want to put a shout out there to JR Web Designs. They are also our partner that we have currently working with us. They are our web designers, so go to them for all of your web design needs. If you're planning to get your website up and want a website, he is the guy that you need to set up with. Great prices, very competitive. You're like, well, I don't want someone to manage it monthly. I want a better deal. Well, he's the guy for you. JR Web Designs, he will be the one to look into. And by the way, with that, our site is now up. 2guysandhockeytalk.com. Now, with 2guysandhockeytalk.com, you can go right to our podcast. Some of you might be there right now. Through our YouTube channel, as Pavel mentioned, you can check in there. We have all the platforms. You can find us even on Spotify through the Sports Empire, as well as Penny Billionaires. You want to check out their music that we were just mentioning. All of the platforms we have there of our partners. And then also all of our blogs. All of our blogs. And by the way, we're accepting writers right now. You got to jump in. I don't want to waste the summer chasing writers down, building our team. Right now, I'm aggressively seeking writers. So check out the latest. We'll be able to get it to your platforms, to our platforms, and we're giving you the platform to be able to work off of. And then right below that, you'll see all of our former guests, the former guests that have been on for a period of time. And so speaking of former guests, let me bring on Sean Mullen. Let's just make sure that we're having some connection issues. Are you there, Sean? Can you hear us? It looks like you might be potentially muted. Are you there?
I'm here.
All right, guys. So here's Sean Mullen. He's going to introduce himself a little bit more in just a moment. So, by the way, all of our former guests, including Sean, are on our website. So you can go follow them, find out what they're doing, get all the latest and all the newest, best things happening. So why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest here, Pavel?
We got Sean Mullen. Mullen, how are things going?
I'm doing well, thanks. Just out here in Swift Current.
So for people that don't know, Sean was on, I believe it was season 2. Were you on last season, or was it season 1 or season 2? You came on twice. I think it was the same season in season 2.
I'm going to say it was over a year ago.
Yeah. So it was all pre-recorded back then, right?
Oh, yeah, probably.
Yeah. So, man, no blunders tonight, Sean. You are live. We're out on over 7 different social media streams. So, guys, hey, Ray, how you doing, man? You got any questions? Someone has feedback tonight. Which one of us has feedback?
I'm hearing that too.
I'm hearing it as well. I muted myself, but I think
you know what? It might be me and my phone sitting right down below here, guys. You never know. It might just be me. Ray, is that? Give us the kickback there if we need any more. So here's the thing, everyone. So tonight, Sean has graciously come on with an hour's notice, hour and 15 minutes. Jumping on. Oh yeah, Ray, thanks, man. Ray said, I guess it was me. Hey, just because I host it doesn't mean that I know what I'm doing. But what's happened tonight is Tim Peel, retired referee Tim Peel of the NHL, had to have a last-minute cancellation. And I quickly said, Sean, we got to go to plan B. I was just chatting quickly on Twitter and tried to see if I could pull him in quickly. And there's a reason that I also didn't know if my co-host here, Pavel the cat, would be on. So, and why is that, Pavel?
Well, I'm in a faraway place right now. I am in Iceland, Bredlasvik, I believe. I am terrible at pronunciations. I am in the hotel lobby here. It is 1 a.m. I will show you. It is still pretty light out because it never gets dark in this city. It is beautiful. It's a town of 130 people. It's on the East Coast, closer to Europe. And so I'm on vacation with the family, but I couldn't miss the opportunity not only to tell Evan you're wrong about everything, but also, of course, to listen to Sean's informative insight about hockey and all things NHL related. And I want to know his thoughts about the playoffs because I know he's been posting quite a bit on Twitter. So I want to get his thoughts. But yeah, so it's been a journey. I'm in the lobby area kind of. It's been fun. So I'm going to try to keep it low key so I don't spook the guests here, especially since half of them probably don't even know what hockey is.
Even in Iceland?
yeah, exactly.
If I remember correctly, they were like the odds-on favorite in the Mighty Ducks movie.
That's true. They were the better team, right? They brought
a powerhouse.
Right? They had the equipment and the money behind that team. So, but clearly the Ducks came back. So quack, quack, quack. We're going to talk about the Ducks later, but go ahead, Evan.
Hey, yeah. So it's talking about low key keeping there. Hey, just a shout out right now to Key over at Sports Empire Network. Hey, Key. We already mentioned you guys in the Sports Empire Network, but just so you know, Sean, Key runs the Sports Empire Network we work with, and she's a Philly fan, everything Philly. So she's got podcasts coming out of everywhere, right, Key? Okay, guys. So why don't we do this tonight? We got all our refereeing questions. We're going to ask Sean. No, I'm just joking. We're not going to ask Sean.
Yeah, I was an umpire when I was a teenager. I'm not sure if I complained enough about hockey referees before.
Sean, why did you blow the whistle yesterday after that second goal Vegas put in the net when Bobrovsky had it down? You have to explain that, right? Let's get your thoughts first off. In general, the Stanley Cup champions, the Vegas Golden Knights. Congrats to them. What are your thoughts on the series, the playoffs, and in general, how it turned out?
Well, if anyone followed the Western Hockey League, they look at the way the Vegas Golden Knights were built with depth, with physicality, with skill, with size on the back end. That's a Kelly McCrimmon team. So we saw him do it in the Western Hockey League. We saw his shrewdness. We saw his ability to make the deals he wanted to have happen. We saw his ability to work within the system. For example, the Mark Stone situation, keeping him on long-term injured reserve just long enough to have cap space and make him available for the playoffs. I mean, he's a very, very shrewd man. And so I'm not surprised to see him have this kind of success at the next level. I mean, Vegas got a great opportunity from day one with the expansion draft to build their franchise. But there's only a handful of players left from that team. They've continued to make really smart moves. When they've targeted players they wanted, they found a way to get them. They've managed the salary cap, even through some difficulties like losing their starting goaltender for the season at the beginning of the year. So you got to give a lot of credit to that management team, starting with George McPhee all the way down. And for Westerners, there's a ton of Western League content on that front office staff. Kelly Kissio, who used to run the Calgary Hitmen, he's a pro scout. Bruno Campesi used to be the coach and general manager in Prince Albert. He's an amateur scout.
Wow.
Craig Cunningham, who we all know the story he had when he had a heart attack, nearly lost his life playing for the American Hockey League. Mark Lamb's Tucson Roadrunners at the time has been able to rebound from that. He's a scout with Vegas. So they've got a lot of Western Hockey League content, not to mention all the players that are on that roster from the Western League. So those guys are built for the trenches. Vegas is a team with a lot of depth. Their blue line is really strong and really physical. I think they were a team built for this type of situation. The thing that was standing in their way maybe was, did they have the scoring they needed at the right time? And could they get consistent enough goaltending? And Aiden Hill, a former Portland Winterhawk, answered that in spades.
Yeah.
He had a good season, fell off kind of after a good 20-game run. And then when he got the ball against the Oilers, he just ran and never looked back. And I don't know if this is going to be the emergence of Hill or if it's going to be a one-hit wonder for him, but that's about as well as you can ask a guy with his track record to play in that situation they're in. It's a testament to him, but also a testament to how deep Vegas is, that there weren't a lot of flaws on that roster, and they were able to cover up any holes that may have emerged due to injury throughout the playoff run.
It's interesting.
5 different goalies. Sorry, go ahead, Evan.
No, that's okay. It was interesting because I actually just tweeted out today that almost 70% of the team of the Vegas Golden Knights are actually out of the CHL of some way. But actually, what I didn't say is 60% plus are actually from the WHL, which, like you said about McCrimmon, that's really interesting. I know, remember this when we went into this season from last year or early season here, Leah Hextall was talking about it, being from Brandon also, right? And just talking about there's so many people that counted them out, right? For this year, but like
when there's the injury in goal, you mean? Yeah.
Well, not even the injury in goal. Going in with their guys that they even had, there was a lot of people that, key pundits that did not think they would be able to maybe sneak into the playoff, but to have a shot even at a title, that was the last thing that they were thinking with that goaltending.
And Kelly McCrimmon is a real detail guy. I mean, he doesn't miss much. Just to give you an example of it, when I was the broadcaster for the Swift Current Broncos, halfway through my time there, my role changed to a contract broadcaster, and I started selling cars to make some money. And I got to Brandon one day after a long trip, and he's like, "Oh, I heard you're driving yourself now, and you're selling cars." Why would the GM of the Wheat Kings need to know that? He's just on top of everything. And so it doesn't surprise me that he's been able to dig players out when he needed to, that he's got, 5 goaltenders deep that can all play, and with Western League connections. Laurent Boissois, former Edmonton Oil King, Logan Thompson, former Brandon Wheat King, then Aiden Hill, former Portland Winterhawk, Gary Patera, former Brandon Wheat King. Again, he knew that league so well, and he found the right type of players. And that roster is littered from, Mark Stone on down to guys Chandler Stevenson, Braden Pahal, McNabb, Theodore, to guys we watched in the Western Hockey League as star players at that level. And so McCrimmon knew them extraordinarily well and built a team around guys he knew and guys he trusted to develop in what they needed to be.
Wow. So interesting enough. Okay, so we're going to go into, I wanted us to talk today in our switch of plans here for today's show, talk around them, because you talked about ruthlessness. You guys both talked about that aggression, that the way Kelly McCrimmon builds this team. One thing is there was been a lot of talk really about, and they're very unapologetic about it, they are impatient. So they will push players in and out. They've lost deals that you and I would say, man, how are you going to win if you keep losing players like they have? Yeah. So working around that here, I'm thinking let's banter around this. So looking into next year. So first of all, we got Aiden Hill up. What do you guys think is going to happen? And I'll let you guys choose who's going to go.
I'll let Sean go first. He's the guest.
Well, it's a very interesting situation because Hill doesn't have a long track record. And I'm a big proponent I don't know if proponent is the right word, but I'm a big opponent of long-term rich contracts for goaltenders. And I think if you look at recent history, any long-term rich contracts for goaltenders typically bite you in the butt, whether it's in year one, like Jack Campbell in Edmonton, or it's long-term, like a Carey Price or someone of that nature. In the last 20 years or so, I can only find a couple of examples of long-term rich deals for free agent goaltenders that have worked out throughout the deal. Henrik Lundqvist, Tuukka Rask, and maybe you could say Vasilevsky now, although he's still got lots of time and lots of money left on his deal. But generally speaking, you start pumping in a lot of money to a goalie, they're not going to give you 5 straight years of great play. You know, look at Calgary. They put that money out for Markstrom, had a poor year, had a really good year, had another poor year, and you're stuck into him for a couple more at big money. So I suspect they'll be smart about it, and they're not going to give him $5 million over 5 years. But for Hill, given how hungry the entire league is for goaltending, and goaltending now with the winning pedigree, I suspect he's going to make more money than Vegas is going to be in position to pay. And then the other question is, what happens with Lehner? Is he ready to come back next year? Because he's still under contract for $6 million plus. So I don't know if there's going to be room for Adin Hill on the Vegas books. Then again, they're a team that's found a way to manage the salary cap. When they, you talk about aggressiveness, when they want it to happen, it happens. They wanted Jack Eichel. Didn't look like there's any chance they could make that fit. Well, Pacioretty just gets disappeared. You know, they find a way to fit guys in. But I don't know if it's a wise move to lock Hill up to big money long term.
Well, and you make some good points. I mean, I think with Pacioretty, they did trade him away to Carolina, and he was injury prone with his Achilles heel, I believe, so he struggled to get back. Goaltending, I mean, you look at Sergei Bobrovsky. Nobody expected him to be what he was in the first 3 rounds that, you know, versus Boston, Toronto, and Carolina, one of the top teams in the 3 top teams in the East, right? So he really just fell off, but he was unreal. But that $10+ million contract is silly. Now Ray is saying manage the salary cap. Here's what I'm going to say.
No, without hang on, he's got emoji faces laughing. By the way, Sean, Ray's out of New Jersey, so he's a big New Jersey fan.
So what I'm going to say is that you know, I see it online, and I'm sure Sean and Evan, you see it too. Like people are, well, Vegas circumvented the cap, or Tampa Bay did the same. Why doesn't your team do it? If you think that your team is better, have somebody to be able to circumvent the cap to make it work. You are not making it work, and you are not seeing it. And Mark Stone had a big back problem to the point where he, even during the playoffs, had a hard time getting into it, right? You hear about injuries now, but he struggled to get back into it. So, I mean, Adin Hill, will he be paid for his services? Most likely. Like you look at Darcy Kemper and what Washington paid out for him. Jack Campbell with his playoff performance last year for Toronto, and Edmonton decided to pay him out. Goalies are voodoo. That's all it is. And one year you can be unreal. Oh, I think they are voodoo. I think it's like 1 year you're incredible. You look at Sergei Bobrovsky. Who thought Sergei Bobrovsky would be unreal? Nobody.
And if you went to Florida this summer and you offered them an out on that deal, they'd take it.
Yeah.
Even as well as he played in the playoffs, if they could get out from under that, they would run.
Yeah.
And as for the salary cap management, I will say this: it's not against the rules. So I don't blame McCrimmon. I don't blame Tampa Bay. I don't blame anyone for operating within the structures of the league. I blame the league. And my issue with it is not, okay, if Mark Stone's injured and can't play, you should be able to fill that spot while he's injured.
Yeah.
My issue is once he comes back, once it's playoff time, your roster should have to fit within salary restrictions. It's had to all year.
Great.
Why all of a sudden, day one of the most competitive time of the season, are you able to run a roster that is way richer than they're allowed to? And I think that's a huge flaw in the salary cap system currently. And it certainly leads to mistrust, because whether you believe teams are doing it intentionally or not, and this is a problem in the NHL, it leads to mistrust of what's happening. Just like I don't think officials or people making rules on suspensions, I don't think they have biases, but they're so inconsistent, it leads to mistrust. So the league needs to do a lot better job of creating an environment where people trust the consistency of their rules and their competitive balance.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
And Ray's saying Tampa brought this to the league years ago, and the league voted it down, so now it's on their own. It was actually after their first cup that this was brought up because I believe it was Kucherov. You guys can correct me.
Yes,
he was
it was.
off until, and then he came back. And again, here's the other thing, and I know it's changed. You guys can maybe add. And I know Evan, you just put out an article, Eichel the Wonder, on our website, so make sure you check it out. So Eichel now is the first $10 million player. For the longest time prior to this season, there was all this talk. Well, there's no team with a player who's over $10 million that's going to win a Stanley Cup. You know, Carey Price was that one year when Montreal went far, but couldn't do it. Sergei Bobrovsky this year, as well as Matthew Tkachuk at 9.5. Jack Eichel finally did it. This narrative is going to continue to change. They're going to change it now to 11 million, like Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Connor McDavid, right? But the problem is that goalpost is going to continue to move until players, not only the salary cap is going to go up, but players are going to get paid. So you can't keep saying, well, teams can't win because you're paying a guy. Players deserve to get paid. I always find it silly that the argument, and I've said this before on shows, it's like millionaires versus billionaires. And the fans get upset at the millionaires, which is the players, because they said the players are asking too much. The salary cap is what it is. The owner and or the GM agree to give out that salary cap to that player. It is on you to make it work within that cap. But if you don't, go ahead.
And this is where we are not agreeing on the same thing, because I think the millionaire has no risk. I think the billionaire has all the risk. So when you have all the risk, you make the more money. So for me, the players, they're just as much like, to me, this is not on the owners. I'm not in agreement with that one.
There's no risk, actually, not in the current system. When player revenue is tied entirely to a 50% number, there's no more risk for the owners than there is for the players.
Yeah,
but if there's a loss, the players may have to go down in their prices, but the owners could be actually having to deal with a deficit. A player will never deal with the deficit. That's the difference, is what I'm referring to. If you have a losing team, and now, and I understand that the league props up the rest of the league. I get it. With the risk.
There's insurance and those things in place.
But if I'm putting, let's just say, okay, we got Ottawa, right? You know, just come in. So we got $1 billion that's sitting there. That, you know, what's that?
Talk about DeBrincat if you want. If you want to pay him big bucks.
Yeah. No, but I'm just talking about the risk factor. When you're putting that kind of money, most of these guys, they have that money and it's available, but you're still talking about moving money, and there's still interest numbers, and there's a lot of things that go into it. They're taking a large investment of their money and putting it down. Whether there's a lot of other places they can invest it in rather than hockey. Obviously, it's looking more and more as hockey continues to increase, it changes. But I mean, this is a whole different piece, though. Obviously,
this is a whole different piece. I'm going to say that. Go ahead, Sean. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of the money the players are getting paid and whether you can be competitive with star players, I would go even further, because to me, those are the guys you can't replace. I'd pay Connor McDavid every cent of the maximum to have Connor McDavid on my team, and then I'll build around that, because he's the unique entity. There's enough guys out there. You know, you look at Janmark or Bukestad or guys like that, you know, because the salary cap priced certain players out, you can get guys on deals. You can fill your roster out with cheap options if you're smart. Guys on the rebound, guys coming off injuries. Like this summer, a Connor Brown will be a great find for somebody, because you could sign him to a contract where his bonuses don't even count until next season. So, you know, that's a guy you can fit onto your roster. And by the way, a former McDavid teammate. But you can't find superstars. If I'm going to have to pay Leon Draisaitl, if I'm the Oilers, $13-14 million, that's fine, because he's one of the most unique players in the world. I think you can win with those guys. And the teams that have won without, I mean, winning is hard. You know, Tampa Bay got off a great run, but you look throughout the league, there's some great teams that take a long time to win. Ovechkin didn't win until he was in his 30s. So this is the most competitive. It's the most competitive the NHL's ever been. I don't think having really good players who happen to be a little more expensive, like superstar players, franchise players who happen to be a little more expensive than really good players, is holding anyone back. It's how they manage the rest of the team.
Yes.
It's the mistakes they make deeper in that lineup. And for, you know, teams like Toronto and Edmonton, it's not Matthews, Marner, McDavid, Draisaitl. Those guys aren't holding them back. It's the errors they make throughout the rest of their roster, in their drafting, in their developing, the bad contracts they've signed. Those are things that are keeping them away from winning.
So
I would also
go ahead.
beyond that. Say that it's even some puck luck. There is luck in hockey. And again, we talked about it just a little bit earlier. Adin Hill came out of nowhere. He was struggling. He was the third string goalie, and now he came out against Edmonton after Laurent Brossoit went down, actual injury, and played out of his mind. Who expected Adin Hill? The Panthers started with Alex Lyon, and Bobrovsky led them to the final. It's luck. You get hot, lightning in a bottle. You get hot at the right time, and you bring it out, and this is what happened. Matthew Tkachuk. Nobody expected Matthew Tkachuk to perform the way he did, and now he's a superstar. I know he's a Hart ballot nominee, but he just came out. Sorry, your thoughts, Sean?
I'd go as far as to say that if Pietrangelo doesn't two-hand Leon Draisaitl, Edmonton wins that series. I believe that firmly. I think that changed the complexion of everything. I don't think Leon was the same. They never talked about that, but he didn't play. He wasn't right the rest of the series. There's something wrong with him still. Edmonton got their heads, their mental focus changed. They lost their best defenseman for the next game because of it. That reshaped that entire series, and they still outplayed them for large portions of the rest of the series.
I would say second best defenseman. I'm going to say Ekholm and Bouchard were better than Nurse. I'm sorry.
Well, they're the defenseman that plays the most minutes on the team. Let's say that. So that was a massive change for them, more so for Vegas than for Vegas, who had a deeper blue line. So there's a lot of factors involved there, but I firmly believe they were right there. And you're right, puck luck, situations that happen. If they win that series, they win the Stanley Cup. So do you go at that team and say, well, we have to change everything? And the same with the Maple Leafs. You beat Tampa, who's an extraordinarily good team. You run into a Florida team that's just on a weird heater. You look at that team and say, well, you have to change everything. There's 16 teams in my mind who made the playoffs this year that could have won the Stanley Cup, and a few that were just short of it that would have been competitive. It's not 1987 anymore, where if you lose in the first to a bottom seed team in the first round, it's a huge upset. There's no LA's beating Edmonton. All of these teams are very good, and all of them are flawed. So it's a weird time in the sports world where you watch fans react and they go, oh, look at these loser teams that lost in the second round again. Look, there's only 8 of them that made it that far. And people accept nothing less than a championship, yet there's no dynasties. No one's winning 5 in a row. It's extraordinarily hard. And great teams like the Ottawa Senators of the late 90s, early 2000s, that long San Jose Shark run, those teams never won, but they were extraordinarily good teams. So it's as hard to win the cup as it's ever been. And I think we can kind of overanalyze it as a result of that.
Well, guys, hey, we are 29 minutes in, and we didn't even get started on what I wanted to start us off today with. So, having said that, but I want to get in defense. Pavel mentioned, Sean, it looked like you agreed with him. Goalies are voodoo, so you guys will see if you go to our website. That's one of my takes. Coming as a goaltender, I don't think goalies are voodoo. Adin Hill, he actually plays well in a zone defense. He tracks the puck well, but he doesn't have quick reflex. He's a blocker goaltender. He fit better. I already told people I thought Adin Hill should start, not Laurent Brossoit. Brossoit going out cost Edmonton that series, in my opinion, because he was the goalie that they could beat. I actually think Adin Hill would be silly to go anywhere else. He's perfectly fit. They don't have to have a better goalie. Take a little bit less, and maybe they'll give him sign a 2-year. Right, or do something to work with them. That's my opinion. Jack,
people say that all the time, though, and sorry to jump on you. And this is a common sentiment from fans. He should take a little less if it's a good situation, a little less if he wants to win, a shorter term. This might be his one payday. Because if he doesn't keep this play up, because you never know, he could get hurt. Like he could fall off. So if someone's going to show up and give him a Grubauer deal, you take it and you run and you say, thank you very much, Vegas. I appreciate it. I'm out of here and I'm setting up my family forever.
So my premise is based on the fact that, do you want to continue to win? That's my premise. It's not like he might get onto a team that's really good, but you're going to have to find a team that is really good. Frankly, I don't look at Martin Brodeur as good as a lot of other people do during his heyday. I look at the defense that was played in the system and the zoning, the way it was actually done. And I'll even go back now. this wasn't me sharing it. This was Jadlyn Spooner, who played for the Windsor Lancers. She had even brought up, Pavel, if you recall, as one of our former guests, she had said that she was worried about Jack Campbell. And if you look at the position of his hips, right, you knew right away he was not good at being able to position himself in time. And she was already thinking that was going to be a concern. A lot of other teams felt the same. Now, of course, Darcy Kemper was the other option, and there wasn't a whole lot difference in how he played the game.
I'd suggest he wasn't the other option. I suggest the other option was to bargain bin hunt and build your roster better around that, because those 5-year, $5-6 million contracts for goalies are a disaster almost all the time.
So
why they had to do that.
Yeah. So was there only really Vince Dunn that was also out there, and he hadn't had enough experience? So, like, I don't think there was much left for the Oilers to look at.
I don't think you had to go to a guy like that. I think you could have got 3 middle of the road type of guys and hope that you could have signed Aiden Hill. You could have. You could have got Eric Comrie, who ended up being hurt, but he had a great start to the season with Buffalo.
Now, in all fairness,
and then finished as their third string goalie in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Like, he ended up not playing as good, and now his future's uncertain. He may go back to the AHL.
I do not think Aiden Hill would have played well in the system. And as I mentioned often, when a lot of times they do the capology stuff, that like the teams, one of the things management do is they do put a certain amount of money. They're not going to invest higher and have a small amount in their goaltending. They still have a rough figure that they put into their zones. I want to talk. Okay,
I just want to bring one thing.
Finish. Yeah, do that. So, Pavel, you finish this piece, and then let me get over to talk about next year and the teams that are favored, because they already got the odds-on favorite for next year, and I want to get to the Oilers on this too.
Sure, and I know Sean brought him up, but Philip Grubauer is a prime example who had an elite year, won the Stanley Cup, played well. He did win the Stanley Cup with the Washington Capitals, but he played the first 2 games, and then Hopi took him out, and Hopi ended up taking them to the final, even though he was the goalie that got him into the playoffs, as most teams do. He came in, got that big contract with, he played with Colorado for a bit, didn't work well.
He was good there.
He was good there, but defensively, they were a better structured team. Went to Seattle, really struggled in that $6 million contract. This year, against the Colorado Avalanche, he excelled again. He played out of his mind. And then he took him on a bit of a run. Granted, he fell against Dallas, but he really brought it out. Again, this notion of voodooism, like, goalies have to get hot at the right time. And sometimes it's that right vibe and right feeling, and it brings it into you. And I know he got paid a lot of money, and he shouldn't have paid. I think it was an overpay. Yeah. But he played what he was worth this year, even though it was Martin Jones for Seattle Kraken that got him to the playoffs. So again,
can I mention one point real quick about goalies? I did a lot of digging on this last year and found that when you look back to just before the start of the salary cap, outside of Darcy Kemper, and it depends how you view Hill, it depends how you view Osgood coming back to Detroit, but generally speaking, if you look at the history of our Stanley Cup champions, their goaltenders came from within. They developed those goaltenders. Free agent goalies don't generally win the Stanley Cup. Guys you traded for and signed for big contracts don't generally win you the Stanley Cup. And I'm not making this up. If you go back and look, it's guys that got their first real shot with the team they won with that tend to win. So you develop them from within. They come at an affordable number. They develop in your system. Those are the guys that win it for you. And typically that is the case. And Hill did come from elsewhere, but Vegas was his first real shot as a guy that takes the ball. That's where he won. So
Jordan Binnington, Tim Tanas, look at some of these big names. But
Fleury, Murray, Crawford. It's like every team up to Kemper. It was a goalie they developed from within. So that's the model that works.
So, just before let's move over to this other area. I want to go into the odds-on favorites so we can talk a bit. Let me just one last piece on the goalie, and this is going to be a reference to you, Sean, because you had a lot of time to observe Stuart Skinner. Now, I would like to say this. I think Stuart Skinner is not voodoo. He played an incredible season. I don't think you were surprised, if I can, Sean, watching what he did in the A as he's developed. Every goalie's going to have, even Patrick Waugh led in 7. You know what I mean? So when you're looking at even the greats of the game, Now, what I think happened is the system that Edmonton started playing, especially in the last, say, 20 games of the season, was different, that got abandoned come playoff time. And they took on a different game and gave up way more high-quality chances on Stewart. And it put him into a different game. And, of course, the undue pressure that he had as a first-year player. Would you not agree, or do you see that a little different?
A couple of things I would say about it. One, I'm not surprised at all. I know Stuart Skinner's competitiveness. I know his mental makeup. I know how he carries himself after wins and losses. He's a guy who carries himself like a winner, has the mental game of a winner, and constantly strives to get better. He's a great athlete. He's got the physical tools. I mean, I watched him in Swift Current shut out Moose Jaw, who was the highest scoring team in the CHL that year, 3 times in a row in their own building. And out-dueled Carter Hart in the final. So I believe he's capable. You look at the season before when he played 13 games, he was not out of place. He jumped into the starter's role this year, carried the team very well. I think the issues were, one, I think they overplayed Skinner in the last few months of the season because they had no trust in Jack Campbell, and they felt like that race for first place was important. So I think they overplayed him, and he played way more games than he had played at the pro level this season. And then jumping into the playoffs, didn't have enough rest leading into it. 1. 2, that's a new experience. You can look at some legends of the game, and there's a number of them. If you go back and look at their first playoff experience, whether it's Carey Price or Marc-Andre Fleury or other superstars, their first run in the Stanley Cup final or the Stanley Cup playoffs, they were a little below average, and they got that experience and learned from it. At the same time, I don't think Skinner was the issue. I don't look back and see a lot of goals that got let in from shots down the right wing, like Patrick Lalime against the Toronto Maple Leafs. This was quite often a lack of coverage in front of the Oiler net that left them in an odd numbered situation in front of their own goal. Huge mistakes, missed coverages, stuff where you hope your goalie can bail you out, but not a situation where the goalie blew it and let goals in that he shouldn't have. So I'm very confident in Stuart Skinner. I just think you have to have somebody with him that you're going to trust enough so that he's not playing 65 games next year as a third-year goalie. So Campbell, if he's going to stay in Edmonton, he's got to play 35. And he's got to play 35 well enough that he doesn't set them back.
Yeah, fair comment. But I would like to just say that I think that when I talk about goalies voodoo, I think that there is predictability. Some need a huge workload. Some don't need a big workload. Some work better with being a more of an athletic goalie.
Is a prime example. Right? He likes to play. He likes to take a lot of shots. If you watch Pekka Rinne play, he gets better as he gets more shots against them. So Ray wants to know. He'd like hear our thoughts on, maybe Sean, you can share your thoughts on what the New Jersey Devils should do with Jesper Bratt.
I'm a big fan of his. I don't know what he's asking for.
Probably 8 by 8, if not more. That's the rumbling.
That's what's being rumored. Yeah.
That's what's being rumored, if not more. 8 by 7.5.
It's kind of the going rate, right? For players of that capability. I'd have
to take a 1-year contract, or discount, 1-year discount. So from last year.
Yeah. I'd have to look a little bit more in detail, but I feel like it's been a couple years now where he's been a very consistent contributor and a big factor in the growth the Devils have had. But you have to look at your salary cap picture. I don't have that in front of me. I don't know what else they have coming due and what other priorities they have to deal with. To me, he's a core piece for them. And
they have a lot of up-and-coming guys. They just got rid of Damon Severson, who went over to Columbus because they could not sign him. They have, a lot of young guys. Luke Hughes is coming up. Their defensive core is going to be shored up. I know they signed Jack Hughes, who's been an elite player for them, an elite center, who probably could be a Hart nominee, if not winner, in the future. If McDavid wasn't in the picture, he'd be there. And they have some big decisions about their goaltending. Mackenzie Blackwood and who's their other goalie, Evan? Akira Schmid.
Schmid. Yeah, Schmid.
Yeah, he came in and out of the
that was
minors.
Crazy.
They'd bring him up. He'd outplay the other two guys. Then they'd get healthy and they'd send him back down again. I kept scratching my head at that decision from the Devils. I don't know why they did that.
Vitek Vanacek.
Yeah, Vanacek and Blackwood, but maybe it was cap management, maybe it was contract management. I don't know, but it seemed like the rookie was the best of the three guys. So I'd be curious to see how they bring him in next year, how they slot him in. But I think, Rat, you got to keep him as long as he's not asking for, $12 million a season.
I have a feeling he's on an entry-level contract, so he'd be okay for a bit.
Yeah, but do you really want to short him, or do you want to sign him long term right now before the price, especially if the cap goes, like we know it's very little this year, but if in the next 2 years, if it goes up, don't you want to sign into an 8-year contract, get the guy at the best price you possibly can? So it's like a deal in 3 years?
I was having a hard time answering these questions because I don't know what the negotiations are.
I understand.
It's like Bouchard. People say, would you sign him long or short? Well, if Bouchard will sign long term for 6, then I would do that. But if he wants 9, then no. If Brat would sign long term for 7.5, I'd probably do that. If he wants 9.5, 10 to sign 8 years, then I'd want a bridge deal.
So speaking of Bouchard, let's move over. So let's quickly we got about 15 minutes left here, guys, to kind of walk in. So let's cover right now. So MGM sports betting. It's called Bet MGM. They've already got the listing out there for next year on the odds-on favorites. Like, talk about wasting no time in the betting game, right? This is absolutely gone crazy. So Colorado comes in as the favorite at 9. And then the Oilers and the Maple Leafs at 10.5. So it's kind of interesting that we see the Avs at the top again, even without Landeskog. Now, just from what we know, so Nichushkin is supposed to be back. They're supposed to be back on. There should be no issues, but they still don't really have much for a second centerman.
Well, I think it's awfully hard to say there won't be issues.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm talking about from a league stand, right? The stuff within the dressing room or the stuff he deals with, but it's my understanding is that there's nothing from a league issue him playing right now.
I would be shocked if he's there.
Yeah, you think they trade him?
I don't know how you can't.
Yeah, but trade him to where and what? If anything, it would be an end of contract, similar to what happened with Kane, San Jose did with Kane. But there wasn't.
I don't think they can.
He's a good player, and there'll be teams that don't have intense media scrutiny, like that kind of marketplace. I think they can make the move.
The problem is he fit in there perfectly. He struggled in Dallas, and he never found his footing. And it was in Colorado that he found his footing and his place in that top 6 role, and was able to produce and win, like, for that team. So, like, I have a hard time believing he would go anywhere else, right? I could be wrong, but, like, who's going to take on that $8 million contract right now?
If a guy screws up to that degree during a playoff run, that's a really hard thing to bring back. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't fully involved in it, obviously, but
I agreed.
I think that'll be a real tough pill to swallow for them.
Wow. Okay, so we know they definitely are missing Landeskog. They missed Kadri last year, not being there as their second line center.
JT Compher's unsigned. He's going
to cost them because that free agent class is very thin. Compher's going to make $5 million, maybe more.
And then you have to look at potentially Cale Makar staying healthy, because now he's been injured a few times. The concussion from Jeff Carter really made an impact on him. And Devon Toews can handle himself, but if he's not partnered up with Devon Toews, Cale Makar is not going to be an impactful player. And I know he's young, but he's already injury prone quite a bit. And this season he's missed probably about 25 to 30 games.
Okay, guys, so I just looked in on Cap Friendly right now. Andrew Cogliano, UFA. JT Compher, UFA. Lars Eller, UFA.
Dumb because of that injury from Eberle. Who knows if he's even going to play?
That's true. Darren Helm, UFA. Matt Nito, UFA. Evan Rodriguez, UFA. Where else? Jack Johnson. Well, they'll be fine with that. Oh, Eric Johnson is a UFA this year, too.
Jack Johnson signed a 1-year agreement because he was a depth defenseman. Rodriguez also signed a 1-year sign.
Eric. But Eric is a UFA right now on Cap Friendly. It shows us he's the assistant captain on their back end. Eric Johnson's a good defenseman. So
was Jack Johnson on the team? I know he went to Chicago last year and then he got traded back to
who? Sorry,
Jack Johnson.
Yeah. I suspect Eric Johnson to me is a guy who lines up for taking a discount to stay there. He's made enough money.
Yeah, he's 35, right? So that makes sense. Yeah.
My
That
question,
would be-
and again, this has been a goalie carousel talk. What is Alexander Georgiev going to be? Because he was good. He wasn't great, lights out for Colorado. Is he going to be good enough to outplay the competition?
I was absolutely baffled when they made him their guy, and he played better last year than I expected. If you looked at his trajectory with the Rangers, he got worse over his first 3 years. So I never really understood the hype. I thought he was okay in Colorado. I don't think he stood out in the playoffs. I don't think he's a guy that'll win you anything. They may win in spite of him, but I don't think their goaltending is going to win them anything. And then at the same time, I don't think it did when they won the Cup either. So
I think they start the year, if you recall, Pavel, both of us talked about that. I had there was talk of the Oilers having potential interest, and I was like, oh man, I hope they stay away. It's just not proven. And I was worried about they were loaded to bear their Stanley Cup year. So it's like they're one of the few teams that reminded me of the Oilers of years ago in the 80s, that they just outscored their problems. Like literally, it didn't matter what goalie they had in place, right? And that's why it was kind of buyer beware even on Darcy Kemper for paying that high contract.
The key, as you noted in that betting for Colorado being first, and I know I've seen a few different betting sites that have put Colorado in the top probably 3, top 5 list, and Sean, maybe you can allude to or talk about this, is staying healthy. I think with Colorado, it's staying healthy. Forget about Nichushkin and the situation if he plays, it's staying healthy because they really got hit by the illness bug this year.
Yeah, there's no doubt to me that if you don't have Makar and McKinnon, then you're not going to win. And if they're not 100%, you're not going to win. That's the two-headed snake there. This summer is going to be a vital one for Joe Sakic to reshape that roster around those stars. Because if Landeskog is long-term injury reserve, gone for next year, what happens with Nichushkin? They have some cap space, but they have some guys they have to re-sign. They have some big decisions to make, and I don't think what they did last year worked entirely. So this is an important summer for Colorado to extend their window. And you're right. All that being said, they can make every right move in the world. If McKinnon and Makar can't stay healthy, it won't matter.
So your thoughts on Toronto and what they should do now?
Hey, what are you doing? You're moving on me. I'm leading the show.
What happens on the vacation?
No, so that's what happens. You head to Iceland, you drink too many beers at 1:30 in the morning. Okay, so no, we might not get a chance to get to Toronto because knowing you guys, there's 2 teams now. So the betting odds, my first question is, so do you look at Colorado as the favorite to win the Cup? Yes or no from both of you?
No.
Okay, so I think
Bear
we're
with
in
me
agreement.
20 seconds. I just saw my phone battery alert go on. I got to grab a cord. So.
Oh, okay. We'll bear with you.
I don't believe Colorado is going to do it, but your thoughts, Evan.
Okay,
do you think so?
I said no. So you know what? Well, he's getting his battery dealt with. Go ahead and talk about Toronto because we're not going to get much chance to cover them today. We'll have to move that into next week's show.
Well, they have a lot of questions to do. I know there's been a lot of talks about their goaltending, and maybe Sean can allude to what their goaltending is going to look like. I know Vladar's been in the news potentially because, as Sean mentioned, there's 3 goalies in Calgary, and Dustin Wolf has emerged as potentially a backup goalie because he played really well at the end. They have a new coach coming in. Mr. Huska has been selected as their coach, WHL winner, great cousin of a friend of ours, Brett, who's been on the show before, so that's excellent.
I think your second cousin,
Yeah, and then Vladar is there, Dan Vladar, who came over from Boston, and he's got some opportunities to make an impact, but I feel like he's going to go on given that they've, they have Markstrom signed, but maybe there's a conversation, and I know Elliot Freeman discussed this, about potentially trading Markstrom. It could happen. He's in his 4th year, coming out of his 6th year. What's that going to look like? I don't know. And so I believe in Toronto, what they have to figure out specifically is not only goaltending, but what they're going to do with their core 4. And until they figure out what they're going to do with their core 4, nothing's going to happen. Now, will Toronto make the playoffs? Yes. I think they're still going to be top 3 in the Atlantic. I'm sorry to say.
Okay, so they're being voted, though, odds-on favorite to be the second, tied with Edmonton, for a chance to win the Stanley Cup. So you're totally saying no.
I don't think they're going to win the cup because Toronto, the amount of pressure there is too much. However, I think that getting the first round over the hump thing has really helped. And I think Brad Treliving is going to bring some changes in where they're going to make a push and they're going to sneakily make a second and or third round appearance this year or the coming season.
I think the Leafs are as well positioned as any team in the league to win the Stanley Cup. Again, we look at a team's history and there's a lot of baggage with the Leafs. That baggage means literally nothing to me. I think they were the better team in the Panthers series, but they couldn't beat Bobrovsky, who was on fire. I think they've got an outstanding core. They have a lot of talent around that core. Dubas did a great job there, but we'll see what they do. I don't trust Brad Treliving. I look at the run that he had with Calgary. I think he signed some awful contracts to guys who are heading into their later years. I don't think they built their system at all. Their prospect base is one of the worst in the league. So it's not the guy I would have handed the team over to if it were me. Now, no one's giving me that option, but I don't think you have to do a lot with the Maple Leafs to be right back where they were. The question is, will they do too much because people are impatient? Will they be able to keep some of the pieces? They have a lot of guys they have to deal with to fill out the roster.
Yeah.
As for the core, again, Sam Pollock famously said you lose any trade when you give away the best player. And it's very difficult to trade a player like that and get somebody back who is equal to them or better than them. You look at what Florida managed to do with the Chuck. That made a lot of sense under the circumstances they were in financially. I think he was the best player in the deal. I think they won it. I think Calgary looked at it. They're like, we got two potential star players who are now overpaid into their late 30s. So that's a win for Florida. But can the Leafs pull off something like that? Maybe. If I were them, the only one I'd look at, because I think William Nylander is under a team-friendly contract next season.
Yeah.
And my issue with that for the Leafs would be there's no way that he's re-signing at that kind of rate again.
Yeah.
Whereas Marner, Matthews, Tavares, those guys are going to be around the number they're at, even if they stay.
Tavares will go down because he's down in 2 years. But
yes,
go ahead.
yeah. But Nylander's going to cost you more. He's going to cost you
100%.
$1 million, depending.
Minimum 8.5 to 9.45.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It depends who's out there, right? It depends who's out there at that time. If it was this year's market, Nylander would get $10 million plus because there's
next year.
Yeah. All right, guys.
I think he's the guy you trade anyone because you only really have him one more year. So you try to make some hay with that and improve your team and improve your depth, maybe, because you're not re-signing him at that number.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair. Hey, so you guys have already cut into your time to talk on the Oilers here, guys. So I'm just being a heads up.
Okay.
We only have about 6 to 7 minutes if we go a little bit overtime. So the other team favored, as the odds-on favorite, are the Edmonton Oilers, who we know have lost 2 straight years to the eventual Stanley Cup champions. We mentioned a little bit about what they're at. So here's the question that we need to put out there now as far as today. So the Edmonton Oilers, what do they have to do to get over the edge, to get to that place, to the next stage, and what's possible within the cap strap situation? So Sean, we'll get you to start.
Yeah, the $1 million question. I think ever since this rebuild has started, you could ask 50 hockey people, and 47 of them would tell you Edmonton needs defense. And I think you'll do the same thing here this summer, and 47 will tell you Edmonton needs defense. The problem is it's easy for people to say that. It's a lot harder to execute, especially under the constraints of the current build of their roster. Now, their defensive core, I would suggest, is relatively average, and then their forward group led by superstars is really strong. Every team is going to have parts that are really strong, parts that are average. The issue for Edmonton is going into this offseason, basically everybody on their blue line other than Bouchard is under contract. So how do you open up spots if you want to? And you look at the free agent class, it's extraordinarily weak, got weaker with Severson going to Columbus, and he made what, $6.25 million? They can't put a player like that on their roster. So is there really an opportunity to make their D that much better this offseason? I say no. My answer would be Cody Ceci was very good his first year with Edmonton. He was clearly injured throughout this year. One, let's see what he is healthy, because if you sell on him now, you're going to pay to sell on him. Two, Philip Broberg, if you look at how he played, you look at the underlying numbers, you look at his development curve, he's at a position where they need to see what he is. I think he's able to take on more responsibility. I think you bring back a healthy Ceci and Broberg. You give both of them opportunities to play with Nurse on your second pair, while Ekholm and Bouchard are your top pair. Then you've got Kulak with one of Broberg, Ceci, or Desharnais. And I think that's a strong enough D to get you in position to be in the playoffs. At the trade deadline, hopefully you're in position to add there, because that's when there'll be a lot more options to upgrade your blue line than there will be this summer, unless something falls into your lap that I'm not aware of. Other than that, I think, you have to find value contracts out there to build around your team. You have to find a way to get rid of Tyler Yamamoto without paying too much. I think a team like Chicago, for example, why wouldn't they take him? They've got tons of cap room. Try him out with their young group, see if he fits. He's making too much for what he contributes. They can't afford to pay him $3 million. He's got to go if there's any way of rebuilding your roster. You got to bridge Bouchard. You've got to find some forwards to fill out the roster that have potential to be really good. Like a Connor Brown, I think, is a great example of that, who can jump in there because coming off injury and circumstances of wanting to build his value up on a one-year deal. Those kinds of players, I think those are the kinds of simple moves you can make. Whether there's a big home run swing or not out there, we've heard a lot of talk about Philly. But to me, the simple way forward is to keep your contracts down, find some guys who are deals that want to build their value back up, run your blue line the way it is, and then plan to upgrade that D-core at the next trade deadline. And I think Skinner's your number one, but Campbell should be better than he was. And I think you'll be fine. Whether you can take the next step that way or not, I don't know, but I don't know what the home run options are out there, what the big deal options are.
So I'm going to add to that, Sean, to the big deal options. So Holland has shown us that he can do big deals, and Matthias Ekholm was a prime example, because I think apart from maybe a few insiders or maybe a few select people, nobody expected that to happen. Yeah. And he came in and made the largest impact to the team after the trade deadline last year for the team. Now, one of the players that I think people forget that is up and is a UFA this season and potentially could be looking for a big contract, and you can make something work because Holland is clever and creative, is Brett Pesce out of Carolina. And if you look at him, he's a defensive defenseman. He can make a big impact, and maybe you need to trade for that. You need to bring him in, and you need to move money out. You look at Kyle Dubas and what he was able to do and move money out, whether it was Patrick Marleau's contract or other players where he's like, I can't have this money in here, and I need to bring in some other guys to play. Holland can get creative. He's got a team around him that should be able to do that. And I think you need to bring in Brett Pesce to potentially solidify that blue line. The other thing that Edmonton
needs is Carolina doing that, though?
Yeah, why would they?
He's a UFA. He's a UFA this season.
Like after the next year?
No, this year.
Right.
This summer.
He's a UFA.
He's a UFA right now.
They have as much chance as so if you're going to have to win a bidding war to bring him in, that's going to be $6 million.
You're telling him you're playing with the best player in the world, two best players of the world, which is oftentimes what you're going to make happen.
So
right?
I think I understand what Sean's saying. So even if you say pay him $4, which is a major discount, where do you clear out $4 million? Because you already
Yamamoto
got
is one example. You're trading him. Maybe you move a Ceci, you move a Broberg if that's what you need.
But you already have to add to Bouchard, and you already have to add to McLeod to make up for last year. We already know they have to make up for last year for McLeod.
They do. But Holland has made it work. Nobody expected Tyson Barrie to go, and here we are. Tyson Barrie was part of the core, and he made it work where he got rid of Tyson Barrie.
That's fair.
And moved him out. He's moved a few other players out. He signed, Derek Ryan now to a 2-year $900K.
Yeah.
He's making it work. And again, Edmonton's problem isn't scoring.
Yeah.
Currently, I believe, if I could be wrong, you guys can correct me. I believe Draisaitl and McDavid are still in tied for top scoring with Jonathan Marchessault and some of the other players in the playoffs, even though they were out in the second round. So scoring's not an issue. Discipline is the issue.
I would say their group of right wingers is amongst the worst in the league, though.
It is, but when you have Hyman, Kane, and Nuge not performing, those are 3 of your top 6 who are not scoring at the rate that they did last season, and that's who you need more from, especially since you've paid them out.
But they're all natural left wingers too. I mean, Hyman can move over, but the right side of their roster is an area of concern.
And you have Holloway coming in. You know what you do with Xavier Bourgault, that's up to you. But if you're going to bring him in and make an impact for him, you gotta decide that, right? That's why you're bringing in these guys who are on entry level contracts. Again, it may not be Brett Pesce. It may be someone out left field that we may not think about. I know we're missing more on the right hand side with Cozy Ceci being there and Bouchard not being signed yet. You don't want to get rid of Bouchard. I know there's been rumblings about Erik Karlsson. I don't know how they're going to make that work. I agree. I'm just saying there's been rumblings out there that I've seen. But again, I feel Holland's going to make an impact, and I think he can make it at the beginning of the season and make small minor trades by the trade deadline. But the big thing is, how do you stay disciplined? So I think it goes back to coaching, because it's not your goaltending, it's not your defense, and it's not your core. It's about your systems. What does that look like?
I also think, though, and I'll quickly note because I know we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Talking about adding a player who's probably going to be a $6 million defenseman. Again, this year, for the first time in a long time, Ed goes into the regular season, knock on wood, without having to use long-term injury reserve, which allows them to build up cap space throughout the year and then add a player at the trade deadline for less than their actual cap number. So, again, I think they have the group on the blue line that can get them into playoff position, and it's much easier to add that player that can help take you over the top. That's a $6 million player come March, when you can bring in that cap number at a discounted number because you haven't been on LTIR, than trying to find a way to finagle that this summer.
But we talked about it at the beginning of the show, and you guys can go back and watch it. What did Vegas do? Vegas was aggressive in how they approached players. They brought in Jack Eichel. They brought in Mark Stone. Yeah. They brought in Alex Pietrangelo, and they were over the cap. That's the rant for another time. But they made it work, and it didn't matter in the playoffs because they got it done. And so that's what Edmonton has to do. You have to find ways to maneuver the cap in order to make it work for you so that you're under it and you work it until the playoffs start. I still think Edmonton is a playoff team. What that looks like in the end, I don't know.
So you mean Stanley Cup contender is what you're saying, not playoff, right, team?
Well, yeah, Stanley Cup contender.
But
I think I would say doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
Apart from maybe 1 or 2 teams, those teams, 16 teams that make the playoffs, maybe 13 to 14 are Stanley Cup.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to let you guys have one final thought to go out. Let me throw mine in. So again, tonight we should be 2 guys in overtime. We're running a little bit later. And even though this was a makeup Plan B show, an hour and a half, again, just in case I forget, Sean Mullen, former play-by-play for the Swift Current Broncos. Man, it's so good that you got back on tonight, because this time we didn't have to talk about your background. We got to just talk hockey, dude. So that's awesome. Thanks for joining in. So if anyone did join in and you're wondering what happened to Tim Peel, the former referee, well, he had a change that something came up tonight, and so there was a cancellation. We're trying to rebook him either for next week or he'll be in September. We've already got 5 bookings for September and October, so we're already moving ahead of time.
My takes were far less controversial than Tim Peel.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let me just throw my take, and then I want you guys to get one last thought.
I remembered you on the ice, Sean, so that's a compliment, I think.
Because whatever you said, Sean, it goes, because you had the last say, being the play-by-play. Okay, so I want to bring mention. So a couple things. I've been all over on Twitter today, and there's been some people totally ticked at me the last couple of days with some stuff. They're like, well, how do you know? And and they want to ask me questions. And well, if I have to tell you everything I know, I'm going to quit telling you what I know. There's sometimes you have connections and sometimes you don't. I am not a person that makes it up. If you want to go read my article from 2012, that on our website, by the way, thanks to JR Web Designs, our website, 2guysinhockeytalk.com. Go find out. I talked about Vegas becoming a reality in 2012 when I was blogging for Oilers Jambalaya. I posted some of the old pieces up. Generally speaking, I don't always have a connection, but sometimes I do. And what I've been telling people, expect something big. Just expect something big if they can make it work. So here's the thing. The Oilers can kick all the tires they can, but it still depends on the other teams. We know there's like three-way deals, stuff like that. But what I will say is the Oilers cannot come back next year exactly with what they got, just fix a few little depth pieces and not make a change. The players just aren't going to be better, and this is my opinion anyway. I do expect a change as something happening in the goaltending department. We do know, all I'm going to say is we do know that there's a lot of tire kicking. When we've heard the name Philly mentioned, I know a lot of people have been talking about Konechny. It doesn't make sense. That's how actually tonight, Sean Mullen and I earlier on Twitter were connecting. Top right, you're bringing in a guy that makes $5 million plus. Why are you bringing in a top right wing when we still need help on D and in goaltending? You're not going to get rid of Stuart Skinner. He's the future. You know that. But how do you get rid of Campbell? Again, this is more talk and conversation. All I'll say is Carter Hart is from Sherwood Park. I'll leave you with that part. But let me talk about that defense, whether they can change it or not. I want to bring up an article that was written today in the Edmonton Journal, and it was brought back to something that was said. I think David Staples posted it, if I believe. And it came back, and it was about Marchessault being interviewed in the Game 6. And Marchessault said, if we keep bringing pucks to the net, we know how they play man-on-man in the D zone. So we just have to beat our guy to the net, and we can get bounces. It's called they played zone. Our guys play man-to-man. You take Nurse, you take Ekholm, you take, CC, any of those guys, and you start making them move around man-to-man, they're going to play with you on that. And this is where I think Woodcroft came up short. It's a lesson learned. I think just like with Stewart, he was under enormous pressure. There was lessons learned on how much they played him. So I do think some things will improve, but I think it's going to be defensive zone structure. And I don't think we're going to see anything on defense unless, as I think, Sean, you mentioned earlier, maybe they can do something by trade deadline, potentially, maybe to bolster something. I think you got what you got. I think they're going to play around with that top six. But I think if they're going to change anything, we're talking on goaltending. Because I'm telling you, they cannot come back with the same duo and go and try this again next year when you're going into a contract negotiation in another year or so with Draisaitl. You've got to do something more. That's my thought. Anyway, you guys, one last thought from each of you, and we'll call it a wrap.
It's been a hell of a season. I've enjoyed it. I know people can harp on what it was, but I think there's been a lot of storylines, a lot of highlights, and it's really elevated some players like Jonathan Marchessault, Matthew Tkachuk, amongst others. Miro Heiskanen, just like out of Dallas. Like you look at some of the players that have come out of the playoffs and just been impactful and made a name for themselves. So I look forward to the offseason because there's been a lot of movement already. Columbus, I'm looking at you and what you're going to be doing. And I'm looking forward to seeing the offseason, the draft, which we're going to cover, and what the new season is going to bring. Because honestly, like this year, I think that there could be a new Stanley Cup champion next year. Completely wild. I don't know who it is. Sean.
My final thought would be, and I think this is maybe a bit of a boring thought, but as I continue to watch this sport develop under the cap and the system that we have now, my feel is everybody overreacts to the last season, especially among competitive teams.
Yeah. When
you're right there, you're a bounce or two or a healthy player or two or a matchup or two away from being a champion. Last Vegas wasn't even in the playoffs, and they didn't change a whole bunch before coming back and winning a Stanley Cup because they weren't really in a position to change a whole bunch. It's a league of, if you have your superstars and you're happy with them, it's finding value contracts. It's making shrewd decisions. It's not overcommitting yourself financially to players that aren't going to meet the bill of those deals, like, say, Milan Lucic as an example, because we're talking about the Oilers. It's avoiding those types of contracts and those types of trades. It's being shrewd and managing the cap well and not overreacting, in my mind, to what happened in a short span of time. And I don't just mean that for Edmonton. I mean that for the Maple Leafs, for the Boston Bruins, for the Carolina Hurricanes, for any number of these teams that are right there on the cusp of success. Do they have to work hard to improve their team? Damn right. They have to find depth. They have to sign that free agent that's about to make that big leap from a $2 million player to a $5 million player. But if you're going to rely on the $6 million guy or the blockbuster trade, then you better be really sure about what you're doing, because the risk on the other side is taking you out of the position you were already in.
Great thought. And
Evan, your final thoughts.
No, I gave my final thought, and my thought of what's happening around the Oilers.
Further final thought?
Not when we're already 11 minutes over and we still got our ending.
We did joke on Twitter when you mentioned that Philly rumor, that the rumor was Philly was interested in somebody that nobody thought they might be interested in. If it is Campbell, because they're rebuilding and Konechny's coming back and Hart's coming back, and you could somehow add Foegele and Yamamoto to the deal to make it work financially, I'm sure that would cost a lot prospect-wise, but I can see why that makes sense, because then you dial back your year commitment and goal, you really improve your top six on the right side, and you put yourself in a position to later upgrade your D if they take him. But I can't imagine anyone is dying to trade for Jack Campbell.
But nobody was dying to take on Cal Peterson, and LA was pushing for getting rid of him. Yeah. And now they've got rid of him. And that contract is not exactly ideal as well. So 3.5, if I recall.
$5 million. 5 years.
Yeah, $5 million. I thought it was 5.5, but yeah.
Yeah, we got around 3.9 on Hart, and then he's into his RFA year. I do not think Konechny is involved in this at all, by the way.
I want to keep an eye on.
But I do not know.
There with St. Louis, but anyway.
It would be funny to see after Skinner and Hart grew up playing against each other, then played against each other in the Western Hockey League final. They were the two goalies battling to be the future from the same area. Imagine being in the same crease.
So right now we got Oiler fans salivating, thinking to have a duo of Hart and Skinner.
Skinner's better, by the way. That's my bias. So, Skinner's better. He's always been better. He always will be better.
Okay, you heard it from the Skinner supporter. And by the way,
you gotta say it with a Boston accent. Cat a hat.
Well, hey Sean, thanks so much for taking the time and jumping on here tonight. It's been a pleasure, absolute. Guys, just remember every Wednesday night, guys, we come on 7 p.m. Follow us on all of our streams. Subscribe, follow, like, share, and just remember to go over to our website and check out through JR Web Designs. Go find all of our postings. So just an update that Pavel put up. I have a posting going up tomorrow morning just on Braden Yeager too. So we're going to be getting some stuff up for you guys on the new draft and stuff. And go under our former guests so that you can get tonight's show and some of his previous seasons with Sean joining us on board, guys. So as always, it's been exciting, but tonight it is an overtime edition here as we come closer to the end of yet another season of season 4. As we say in the famous words of the great Ed Whalen and Red Green, in the meantime and in between time,
keep your sticks on the ice and stay safe and keep your heads up.
Cheers.
I'm just so sick and tired. I'm hanging on a wire, a foot over the fire, and it's burning. I can feel it inside. Done with the same cliche, done with the day after day. There's got to be a way. Now is the time to break the tie. I'll live, I'll die.